بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. Inshallah tabarak wa ta'ala, we want to start this session off with encouraging you all to share this session, to like the platform, and to engage us in the normal way we engage every week. And we all know what that means. Let's make this movement a movement that is sustained. And that movement is sustained by our engagement and our support and our spreading of the work we're doing here on the Black Imams Roundtable, which is an extremely important work. We are your voice, and we represent your concerns. And we want to spread among our communities the correct methodology of Islam by following the way of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah and being clear on what is Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah in the matters of the creed, in the matters of the practical rules, in the matters of spirituality, and then the overwhelming majority of the Islamic sciences that help us actually live our Islam. The methodology to learn all of those things. This is one of the main missions that the Black Imams Roundtable was established for. In addition to addressing in an unapologetic way our concerns, you know, it is important that we take our own work serious and that we engage at every level. I had some beautiful discussions this past week about our community as a collective. And one of those discussions related to how do we make our efforts, our institutions sustainable. And the answer that I kept coming up with is that we have to learn our deen properly. That needs to be a priority in our lives. You know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Quran, وَقُلْ رَبِّي زِدْنِي عِلْمًا, and say, my Lord, increase me in knowledge. And if you look throughout the Quran, from Surah Al-Fatiha to Surah Al-Nas, you won't find any command that Allah asks the believers to seek an increase except an increase in knowledge. وَقُلْ رَبِّي زِدْنِي عِلْمًا. My Lord, increase me in knowledge. So that must mean it's important. And the knowledge is something which the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned as an obligation when he said, "Talabul ilmi faridatun ala kulli Muslim," that seeking the knowledge is an obligation on every Muslim. And we mentioned last week that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "May yuridillahu bihi khayra yufakkihu fid din." That whomever Allah wills good for them, He gives them the understanding of the religion, the understanding of the deen. And the understanding of the deen only comes by learning the knowledge that leads to that understanding. And our teachers used to tell us, when they would relate this hadith to us, they would say the opposite is also true, which is what? Whomever Allah did not will the good for them, He will not give them an understanding of the religion. So a way to understand that Allah wants good for us is to the extent that He facilitates and grants us access to the knowledge of this deen. And tonight, we're going to continue our discussion of the science of al-fiqh, the science of the practical rules of the religion. And it is a science that has been grossly neglected for far too long in our communities, So inshallah ta'ala, tonight, we're going to lay out a practical way for us to learn the matters of the practical rules and judgments in the religion under the field or the science of al-fiqh. So we're going to discuss, number one, how to acquire knowledge. Number two, how do we learn al-fiqh? How do we learn the rules of the religion? What is the methodology? And I mean the proper methodology to go about that. How do I study? What is the curriculum that I need to learn? From where do I take that knowledge? Inshallah ta'ala, tonight, we're going to discuss all of that. And I want us to say, before I defer to my fellow imams, I want us to learn to just say no. Right? Let me put that up there. Right? And maybe we'll put some, right? I want us to learn to just say no. And you may ask, what to say, just say no about what? Just say no to settling for being unlearned about the matters of our religion. Just say no for someone teaching us the religion in a way that makes us subservient to them. Just say no. Which means that we're going to have to do something. If we really mean no, and no means no, you can no longer mislead us, that means we're going to have to do some work. We're going to have to stop being people that are fascinated with slogans that are empty in reality. Among those empty slogans is, I follow the Quran and the Sunnah. That's an empty slogan in reality, especially when it's misapplied. And we want to have some talk about that, because this is going to be a practical, down-to-earth conversation so that we can lift the veil of ignorance about the matters, especially the matters of al-fiqh, from our communities. So this is going to be an interesting, inshallah, discussion. And hopefully the end result is you'll walk away with a blueprint of how to acquire the knowledge of fiqh, from whom to take that knowledge, and the authoritative position of Ahl-Sunnati wal Jama'ah in relation to following qualified scholarship and qualified methodology and a qualified approach to al-fiqh fi din, the understanding of the religion. And with that, I'll pass it to my fellow imams, and we'll get this party started right, as they say. MashaAllah. Imam Faheem, it goes to you, Sayyidi.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulihi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Wa man tabi'ahum bi ihsani ila yawmiddin wa ba'd. Alhamdulillah, we'd like to welcome you all to tonight's podcast or broadcast of the Black Imams Roundtable. Alhamdulillah, we are honored to have you all here. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless you and to raise your ranks, inshallah ta'ala. As you know, I'm Imam Faheem, aka I'm Nino Red. You know, you heard of Nino Brown. I'm Nino Red. All right. Old Jack City. Alhamdulillah. So as to follow up on Imam Amin, please like and share this platform, inshallah, and spread it. And also be sure to make your donations, inshallah ta'ala. Let's try to get that out the way as quickly as possible, so we can cover that, inshallah. So just to follow on the footsteps of Imam Amin, we were talking about fiqh, and in particular, the things that are relating to fiqh. Yeah, drop that bread, as far as, understanding the rulings, the ahkam based on detailed evidences, because that's really like one of the definitions of fiqh. Is the knowledge of practical legal rulings that run their detailed evidence. And so now the question will come, when we talk about detailed evidences, who has the right to to pass off those detailed evidences? And nowadays we find people think that it's just as simple as you can just open up the Quran and an authentic hadith, and of course when they say authentic hadith, they're talking about the authentication of one person who took the task of authenticating and making a hadith inauthentic based on their on their own soul maverick kind of research, and this has become problematic. So now that for people who don't know, when you talk about fiqh and you talk about following the madhab, then you hear all these terms of following opinions of men and blind following and all of these other things they have come up with. But actually, when we talk about Quran and Sunnah, and when we're talking about following the madhab, there's actually it's based on the Quran and Sunnah, because first in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that where He says, "Are those with knowledge are equal to those who don't have knowledge?" They are not equal. And then of course the ayah we always mention, "Fas'alu ahlu dhikri in kuntum la ta'lamun," and ask the people of dhikr, or the people of knowledge, if you don't know. And so this is the basis of fiqh, that when you don't have knowledge concerning a particular subject or a particular incident, then you have to ask those who know. And so this is the foundation of fiqh. And so it is a duty for a person who doesn't know. And if a person is not skilled in the sciences of Islam, meaning that they're not like a mujtahid, then they don't know, So having knowledge is not as easy as, being, well-read or even well-versed. You have to have training, you have to have certain sciences down, all of the sciences down. You have to master them, and you have to have ijazah, and you have to have someone who knows that you know what you're supposed to know. And of course, knowledge is taken from teachers and not from books. And so there's a hadith, we mentioned this before, about following a madhab or following, scholarship, Then there's the hadith when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he sent Mu'adh ibn Jabal to Yemen, And we know about when he went to Yemen. He said, "Sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that you're going to a people of the book," and he said to make sure that the first thing you call them to is La ilaha illallah. But also, when he sent them to Yemen, he mentioned to him, he said, "How will you pass judgment on people when issues come up?" And then Mu'adh ibn Jabal, radiallahu anh, he said, "I would judge according to the book of Allah." And then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, "What if you don't find the judgment in the Quran?" And so this is also important, that everything is not, of course, the Quran is a clear book, but when we talk about issues that come up, sometimes they might not be as clear in the Quran where you can just extract it directly, right? And so he said, well, what if you don't find something in the book of Allah who's subhanahu wa ta'ala? And then he said, after that, and then I would judge according to the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then he asked him, what if you don't find a judgment there? And then Mu'adh ibn Jabal, he said, then I will, use my own judgment. Then I will, use my best judgment to judge an issue. And then when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam heard him say this, he like patted him on the shoulder and, told him like basically good job, And so this is one of the foundations of fiqh. That's a hadith that's found in the Musnad of Imam Ahmed. And so this gives us a foundation of how fiqh is to be understood. So look who the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he sent Mu'adh ibn Jabal, This is a scholar by far, And this is another thing, when we talk about scholars, or even with the Sahaba, all of them, they didn't, all of them weren't just, passing off judgments. They defer to specific Sahabas amongst them, And I believe the number was about 7 jurists that were in Medina, And they were the ones that even the Sahaba who were greater than them or even older than them would defer to them for as far as judgments, And so, this is how madhabs started, going to a person who has the knowledge and ask them about a detailed ruling, and then following that ruling, following that judgment, and that all of that has been preserved in what we have now as the 4 madhahib, because you often hear people nowadays saying, like just absurd stuff like, well, what madhab did the Sahaba follow? What madhab did the Prophet ﷺ follow? And because they're not trained in knowing these things, what a madhab actually is, they think it's just like a school of thought of collected opinions, that could be right or be wrong. But it's actually a system of codified and qualified scholarship that one has to follow, because if one has to ask a question about an issue, that means they don't know. And so how will they know? They have to ask those who do know. And this has been preserved and passed down in a very intricate system that we have as the madhahib nowadays. And so this is why a person has to follow, because a person can't just go to the Quran and Sunnah and think they can extract rulings. That's the same thing as saying that you can go right to the the source where they where they make the trees for the opium, and you can just you can just extract heroin from it. No, there's a process, that you don't know how to do it. You just getting the finished product. That's what following the madhab is that you're following a finished product of knowledge that all you have to do is enjoy it. All you have to do is enjoy it. And that's how easy it is, because if you know the work that goes into, deriving rulings and knowing the science of what it means to derive rulings and the knowledge that goes behind it, then the person would stop saying that they're just following Quran and Sunnah. And inshallah, I think we're gonna have Sheikh Noor on tomorrow morning, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Okay, well, I don't want to spoil it because he posted something on his page that was very, very important about, why people need to follow madhabs, because he had an interaction with somebody, and it was really like, man, how people are deprived and what they're thinking that they're able to do. Like, even as a person as a so-called student of knowledge, how they think that they can just go with what's the preferred opinion, or what's the most authentic proof, and weighing the proofs against each other as if they have the ability to do so. So that was part of the dialogue on Sheikh Noah's page, and that it really just raises some eyebrows about how people have been deprived of these sciences, especially fiqh, and many people who come out of certain institutions, they don't know how to apply fiqh. They think that fiqh is based on following the most authentic hadith. And so if they could just determine that one hadith is more authentic than the other, and it could be one or two, then they think, okay, that's the one you go with, and this has been problematic. And I can't even tell you personally how many times I've seen this really harm people because they thought that they were following the most authentic dalil, and this question comes up all the time. What's your dalil, Afi? What's your proof for this? And it's been so much harmful. So as Imam Amin was saying, how we really need to boggle down and make sure that we're learning these sciences properly so that we can teach them, inshallah. All right, so that's my short intro. I'll pass it to the genius, inshallah ta'ala. Please don't forget, as you're coming in, to like and share and drop that bread, So we let's put that bread in the oven, let it rise up so it could be fat, inshallah ta'ala. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala double and multiply your rewards. Amin.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Alhamdulillah. My introduction. It's been on my mind. It's something deep too. When you think about it, it's a simple question. But when you think about what's being asked and who usually asks the question, if you stop and think about that, it reveals a lot. Sometimes, and I'm sure most, if not all, imams get a similar question. From time to time, I get the question, Imam Naeem, do you have imam training class? Or can you have an imam's training class? Do you all get that question sometimes? It hit me a while ago. Before, when that question used to come to me, I would say yes or no, or try to facilitate it. And even one time we had one. But something hit me about that question. And so lately, when people ask that question, before I say anything further, I ask them, have you completed any basic book with a teacher yet? Have you completed any basic book with a teacher yet? The question is usually no. That response, the answer is usually no. So let me rewind. Sometimes people come wanting an imam's training class. And then when I ask, have you completed a basic book with a teacher yet? The answer is usually no. Now, my question to all of our family online right now, and I want you all to respond. What do you learn from an exchange like that? What do you get out of that? I want to know if you got the same thing I got out of it. Just in case you missed it, I mentioned that sometimes people come inquiring about an imam's class or an imam's training class or teach them how to be an imam. I said that now, when that question comes, my response is another question. Have you completed any basic book with a teacher yet? I said the answer is usually no. And I want to know from you all, what do you get from that? Sister Haja Stacy said that person isn't ready. My opinion is that that's more than a class. Why do they want to be an imam? Let me give you a hint what I got from it. We're in the context of fiqh, where the rubber meets the road. That's the context. I got a lot of things out of it, but I'm really speaking in the context, the subject of what we're talking about tonight. Farouk said they have business asking for imam training. They need basic training. He's getting there. Incomplete understanding of your religion, which will cause many missteps. No business, he meant. I agree with most of what you all said, but the thing that it taught me, which is most of us don't think Islam has a structured system of learning, along with a tartib, an order. I repeat, most of us do not think Islam has a structured system of learning, along with a tartib, an order. You do this, then you do that, then you do that. You have to learn this first, and then you could build upon that and learn this, etc. I repeat, most of us do not think Islam has a structured system of learning, along with an order, a tartib. I think a lot of us think that being an imam is just prayers, salat, classes, and khutbahs. Or maybe I should put khutbahs first. Maybe that's what they're seeing most. When I'm teaching basic fiqh, and that's all I teach is basic fiqh, I always mention that, hey, you know this book is a children's book, right? I always say that because we're on level 1. All of these books were written for young people, teenagers, less than teenagers. These books, these basic books in all of the schools were written, the intention of the author was to write this book to benefit children. On top of that, if you keep that in mind, and then you open up one of these books, us as adults who have been Muslim 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years, most of us will fail a test if we are quizzed about anything in these basic books that were written for children. Most of us will fail that test, even if we've been Muslim 60 years. But the things that are in these books were intended for children because they're entering into adulthood. They're going to have responsibility, so they need to know their fardul ain. They need to know their individual obligations. So the fact that most of us don't know or would fail a test in any one of these basic books, it's a clear indication that we do not know the bare minimum of what an adult Muslim needs to know. And too many of us are quite comfortable right there. We cool with that. Why are we cool with that? Because I follow Quran and Sunnah. When we began this series, I gave an analogy talking about social promotion. I'm going to mention that again because most of us, we need to take remedial courses. We need to go to summer school. We need to go to night school. But a lot of us don't want to do that in Islam because we think we're getting promoted. We think we're okay. I think each and every one of us as individuals have to forget about what's popular and open any one of these basic books from any of the 4 schools and, and ask ourselves, do I know this? I'm supposed to know it. So in my concluding remarks for my introduction, when we say the word madhab or school of thought, in this context, I want you to look at it as a synonym, has the same or similar meaning as tariqah, the word that we usually use for a spiritual path. But a tariqah, it literally is a road. It's a path. I need you to look at the madhahib, the schools of thought, with the understanding of it being a road, a path, a street. Look at the madhahib as an interstate highway. Has speed limits, has lanes, has rest stops, has police on it if you don't drive correctly. If you break down, there's some tow truck company that's responsible for the interstate. Even if you don't have AAA, they're going to move you out of harm's way. The state police are going to come. Look at the madhahib like that. And look at the other stuff as DIY, do it yourself. Follow Quran and Sunnah. I follow Quran and Sunnah. I'm going to the Quran myself, even if I don't know the language of the Quran. I don't need nobody else. I'm going to the Sunnah myself, even if I don't know the Sunnah, the language of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Even if I don't have the qualifications, DIY, do it yourself. In the same way, some of us don't have qualifications to repair a car. Some of us go on YouTube and watch videos to see if we can repair our cars. So DIY, do it yourself, that could be anything. Back streets, through the woods, going the wrong way down the one way. That could be anything. You might actually get to your intended destination. Or you might go the complete wrong way. Or it could be a setup. Hey, sir, can you tell me where such and such and such address is? Yeah, sure, right? Go to this corner right here, right? Make a right. It's dark down there, but don't worry about that. Then keep going further, make a left down this little dark street right there, and that's where you want to go. And then when you get down there, there's some cats waiting back there to jack you, ready to rob you and everything. Do it yourself could be any of that. You may actually get to the same place that the interstate takes you. Most people don't. Most people end up someplace else because they wanted to do it themselves. And the deep thing about it is many of us, most of us, we were never even exposed to the interstate. Wait a minute, there's a highway? I could have got on the highway and went there? Yeah. You know, that actually happened to me here in Pittsburgh. This is actually my second time living in Pittsburgh. The first time I lived here, like it's weird because like almost all our highways intersect downtown, right? And so there's a little piece of highway. If you're from Pittsburgh, I'm gonna just mention what the road is, right? So you coming from 28, Route 28, and you want to go to 65, Ohio River Boulevard. I thought that you had to get off 28, go on the local streets, North Shore, and then get on 65. I didn't realize till I moved here the second time that you didn't have to get on any local streets. I could have just went on 28, act like I was going through the Fort Pitt Tunnel, and then jumped right on 65, kept right. My point is that it may seem like I'm bashing or I'm blaming. The point is that a lot of times we don't have access. We don't know. We don't know this stuff. We didn't know that there's orders and Islam actually has curriculums and all of the subject matter, basic books, intermediate books, advanced books. But a lot of times people don't tell us that stuff. And we don't find out until we've been way in Islam for a long time till we realize, wait a minute, there's an order to this thing. I was supposed to learn this before I learned that. And I need teachers to check or to verify that which I've read or that which I've learned. Oh, I didn't know that. So like I said, for me, that I think that was for me anyway, it was a perfect example because it really happened to me. I lived in this city before, and the whole time I didn't know that to go from this side of town to that side of town, there was actually a highway that connected me, and I would get off and take local streets. Most of us have been doing that in the Dean, and we don't know that there's a interstate highway that will take us there much quicker, has all types of security apparatus to make sure we don't go wrong or get into any problems. And if we break down, someone's going to come to help us. That's the madhahibs. That's the schools of thought. But many of us have been lied to and have been taught that, you can either follow the Quran and Sunnah or you can follow a madhab, as if like they're the opposite. Like it's as if you do one, you can't do the other. In fact, there is no way for a regular common person to follow the Quran and Sunnah unless they follow a school or a teacher who's following the school, to be more exact. So you're not really following Quran and Sunnah if you say you follow Quran and Sunnah. You living right now, you're not following the Quran and Sunnah. You following somebody's nafs, maybe yours. Because the Quran is not being revealed in your presence. The Quran was revealed a long time ago. So either you trusting yourself about what those verses mean, or you trusting someone else. You're not with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You're not seeing his explanation. You're taking it upon yourself to give meaning to what he said and did. Or you're trusting someone else. But you're saying you follow Quran and Sunnah. You're not, because you're not living during the period of revelation. You're following someone's understanding, someone's interpretation of Quran and Sunnah under the guise of following the Quran and Sunnah. So my main point that I wanted to emphasize and stress is that Islam has a structured system of learning along with an order. Alhamdulillah.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. I want to approach this in another way, right? I put something up as Imam Naim, may Allah preserve him, was talking. And can everyone copy this and paste it back in. So copy it and repost it. If we could do that real quick, because I want us to learn. I mean, sometimes one of the most disheartening things for a teacher or someone who's conveying is for people to hear them but not understand them. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, one of the ways by which he ensured that people understood him, he would make them repeat, or he would repeat. Often he would be repeating, and sometimes he would have them repeat. And that's one of the secrets of a dhikr, right? The more you repeat something, it will settle in the heart, the more you repeat. And that's why our teachers used to say, fil i'ada ifada. The more you repeat, there's a benefit. And what I've discovered is oftentimes we hear, but we don't understand. We heard it, but what we heard, we can't articulate. To me, I've been a teacher for a long time, decades. And alhamdulillah, I notice among us as a community, we're good listeners in terms of hearing, but we're not very good at preservation of what we hear. We heard it, but we didn't preserve it. And because we didn't preserve it, we never fully understand it. And this is very important. So I wanted to start here. What I wanted to bounce off what my other Imam said. Access to proper learning has been denied for the vast majority of our practicing and living Islam in our communities. Access to authentic, classical, global, historic Islamic knowledge has been denied for the vast majority of our time practicing Islam for many of us. This is an undeniable fact. I want to ask you a question. Do you agree with what I just said? That's a question. So it requires, inshallah, that we answer. I'll repeat what I said. Access to authentic, classical, historical, global Islamic knowledge has been denied to the vast majority of us the whole time we've been trying to practice Islam. Do you realize that? Because it's a starting point for us to move forward. You know, they say in recovery, they said the first step to getting over abuse, substance abuse, or addiction is admittance. That you have to admit you got a problem, right? If you're not willing to admit that, that problem ain't going nowhere. So I think, and a lot of times we don't want to admit we have a problem because it makes us feel bad. So we won't admit that, listen, I don't know, because we equate not knowing to mean we're not intelligent. And that's not the case. Some of us equate the fact that I don't know, in my mind, subconsciously that makes me feel inferior because it means that I'm not intelligent. We have harsher words to use, but I'm learning to curb my tongue. So that's not the case. It's not necessarily that you're not intelligent, but if you ain't exposed, if you don't have access, it's impossible for you to know. No matter how smart you are, you just don't know because you don't have access. Many of us, let me move it to a worldly side, suffer from financial struggles because we don't have access to wealth. Whether that access is how to get it or jobs or careers or education that leads to that. So you don't have no money, you broke, you don't have access. Had you had access, you might be in a much better financial position if you just had access. Y'all following me? Is everybody with me? Y'all know me, I like to really engage. Let's make sure we following each other, right? So oftentimes, we hear terminology and we don't understand what we're hearing. So we hear madhab, and let me put madhab there. We hear Quran. We hear Sunnah, etc. We hear all these terms. And we repeat those terms without understanding the content of the term, right? So we translate words, but we really don't understand what is really entailed by the terms we use, right? So for instance, a person says, I follow Quran and Sunnah. And we all, how many of us have said that? Let's be honest, I have said it, all of us. I would hope all of us believe we follow the Quran and Sunnah. Whether that belief is factual or fictitious, we do believe I follow Quran and Sunnah. Am I right? This is known. But when we say I follow Quran and Sunnah, do we ever really think about what that entails? Because you say you follow Quran and Sunnah in what? I follow Quran and Sunnah in what? What are you talking about? And the assumption when you say I follow Quran and Sunnah is that you know Quran and Sunnah and you have access to the knowledge of Quran and Sunnah. That's a given when you say I follow something, right? So, first step is, did we identify what is the Quran? What does it contain? In order that I would follow it? I'm going to ask you a question. So usually when we say Quran and Sunnah as opposed to a madhab, we're talking about something specific. So if we're talking about madhabs and we're talking about Quran and Sunnah, and the statement is opposing, one opposes the other. So in other words, if I follow Quran and Sunnah, I don't follow a madhab. If I follow a madhab, I don't follow Quran and Sunnah. That's the assumption. That's what's given. The question becomes, when we start really having a conversation, not a debate, just we want to understand a conversation. What are we talking about? What are we following in relation to a madhab or the Quran and Sunnah? What are we following? That's a question. So when we say Quran and Sunnah, as opposed to a madhab or a madhab, and it's what are we actually talking about? What are we following? Religiously, what are we following? That's a question. for us. I want to engage us. What are we following? What are we talking about? This is critical thinking 101. We have to think this out. So everyone needs to be involved. We're not talking, what are we talking about? I'm going to look at your answers, and from your answers, I'm going to say that we understand. What are we talking about? What do we all actually mean by that when you have it? One way or the other, what are we talking about? I want to see if anyone comes up with it. So far, nothing. Close, but no Wookiee button. It's very simple. When I say it, it's going to click, and some of you have indicated it, but you're too broad. This is some deep stuff. Yeah, right. Make some more faces because you ain't got it. I'm joking with you. No. Really, come on. No, we don't have an idea, huh? Close, close. You're getting warm. Not quite. You YouTubers. You're close. You're right there, but I want it a little close. Okay. Let me help you. You're close. Some of you are very close. The one who's really close is Sister Rashida. May Allah reward her. She's probably the best student. I don't know. Right? Good. You know what you're talking about when you have that discussion? Whenever you talk about a madhab, as opposed to Quran and Sunnah, or Quran and Sunnah, as opposed to a madhab, you're talking about al-ahkam al-shar'iyya. You're talking about legal rulings. That's it. You're not talking about anything else. You follow what I said? Whenever you're talking about this so-called opposition of Quran and Sunnah versus a madhab, or a madhab versus Quran and Sunnah, you're only talking about legal rulings. You're not talking about anything else. Do you realize that? That's all you're talking about is legal rulings. Now, so they call them, I'll help you. In Arabic, we say al-ahkam al-shar'iyya. Right? Legal rulings. That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about Aqidah. We're not talking about some broad, every aspect of Islam. We're not talking about that. We're not talking about manners and behaviors. We're not talking about seerah. We're not talking about anything but legal rulings. That's all we're talking about. We ain't talking about nothing else. Now, when it comes to legal rulings, we got to understand what are the legal rulings we're talking about. So that's the general legal rulings, right? What type of legal rulings are we talking about? We're going to talk about legal rulings that apply to acts of worship, legal rulings that talk about dealings and transactions, legal rulings that talk about family matters, marriage, divorce, child custody, things like that. Legal matters that talks about crimes and punishment, if we wanted to summarize. So we're talking about these categories of legal rulings. So whenever we're talking about a madhab as opposed to Quran and Sunnah, in terms of legal rulings, we need to narrow the discussion, right? We need to narrow the discussion. Now, the question becomes, since that's what we're talking about, if we're only talking about legal rulings, Islamically, as Sunni Muslims, now let me ask you a question. As Sunni Muslims, we say we are Sunni. How many of us are Sunni Muslims? Say I. Just put I. That's it. Or me, however you want to do it, if you want to be special. How many of you are Sunni Muslims? Be patient with me. I'm walking us through understanding. Right? Sunni Muslims. Right? So Sunni Muslims, all of us, most of us are Sunni. We say I'm Sunni. Right? What are the sources? Let's make it even more refined. What are the primary sources that are overwhelmingly agreed upon by Sunni Muslims to learn legal rulings? From what sources are the foundational principle, primary sources that we get legal rulings from? That's a question. Because where do we get these legal rulings? Since we're talking about legal rulings, from where do they come? What are the primary sources by which we learn legal rulings as Sunni Muslims? Can we answer? So we're going to, this is an education process too. So I want everyone to put, where do Sunni Muslims get the primary sources where they get legal rulings from? Okay. Let me explain. Some of you got the answer, right? So, by the overwhelming agreement of Sunni Muslims, the primary sources from where we get legal rulings are Al-Quran, As-Sunnah, Al-Ijma', and Al-Qiyas. And that's prior to actually learning the detailed legal rulings. The source, where those legal rulings come from, the primary sources are those four. So therefore, this whole discussion of Quran and Sunnah is not even a Sunni discussion when we're talking about legal rulings. Do we understand that? I'm trying to wake us up. The whole discussion of Quran and Sunnah as opposed to a madhab, in reality, goes against the vast agreement of the primary sources, how Sunni Muslims learn about legal rulings, which we're talking about as a Sunni. So as we're saying we're Sunnis, if you're just saying I'm following Quran and Sunnah, in terms of legal rulings, you're missing sources that are agreed upon by the vast majority of Sunni Muslims. So if you said I follow Quran and Sunnah, you've excluded necessary primary sources by which we learn legal rulings that you're talking about following. It doesn't, and I'm talking about just access. If you go over the vast body of Islamic scholarship, this is agreed upon by the vast majority of top legal experts in Sunni Islam. Historically, globally, for over 1,300 years. So that very discussion is a baseless discussion. When you look at Islam historically, globally, authentically, and classically, that stuff don't even make sense. And not even the proponents of that, their scholars don't accept that. That's deep. That's like, I'm just talking about access. even the ones who are shoving it down our throat, they're scholars. You know, they say, kibar al-ulama, the great scholars. Of where those ideas come from, they themselves don't accept that. Give you an example. In our time, especially in our community, I'm helping us. I want us to think. Critical thinking is extremely important. Can we put this up? Critical thinking is a must for us as a community. Please do not put your brain on pause. I'm sorry, I'm going long, brothers. I'm gonna stop. But I need to help us, right?
No, keep going, man.
Right? Can we all copy that real quick and put it up? Critical thinking is a must for us as a community. Once you stop thinking, you're done. Put a fork in him, you cook him, he's done. He don't think no more. He don't even use his brain. Like, forget about it. He's finished. When we hear the term Quran and Sunnah, I'm getting you to help think. In our communities, I'm being specific here. In our communities, which is primarily the Black community, in the inner cities of America, where does that idea have its root, its source? We follow Quran and Sunnah. From which part of the world does that idea come from in our communities? Answer the question. Please help me out here. From where does what part of the globe, what country does that ideology that's in our community, where does it come from? Do we know? A country, an area, a real area. We don't like real area. Saudi Arabia, right? Saudi Arabia. That's where that stuff comes from in our communities. That's well known. And if we don't understand that, that means we don't even know what's happening to us, right? That's a Saudi methodology that has reached us. Now I want you to stop. That's the area it comes from. Does Saudi Arabia have a government? That's a question. I'm helping us think. We're walking through it. Does Saudi Arabia have a government? Yes. Okay. Critical thinking. Since they have a government, I would assume they have laws, right? That's safe. They have a government. They have laws, right? They have laws. They have laws. Right? And if they have laws, they must have judges to execute those laws, right? To enforce those laws. They have judges, right? Do you realize that? They have judges. Those judges have methodologies by which they extract laws. And if they're following in their claim Islamic laws, by the judges and muftis who's given legal judgments in Saudi Arabia, what are the primary sources that they consider to make the laws and give out the judgments? From where those primary sources of legal rulings do they get them from? What are those primary sources according to their own government? I just want us to think. Do we know? So if I'm in Saudi Arabia and I'm learning legal theory and law about Saudi Arabia, and they're talking about Islamic law, and I asked, what are the primary sources by which you extract your rules and your laws? What would they tell me? Does anyone know? Anyone lived in Saudi Arabia? Anyone studied Islam? Since we quote them so much, we should know, right? We think that's the center of Islam and that's where all the stuff, we should know. What are the sources that they would say? The primary sources, according to them, I'll tell you. Al-Quran, As-Sunnah, Al-Ijma, and Al-Qiyas. The same thing, right? So their very structure is built on the same thing of everybody else. Everyone else, same stuff. In fact, their agreed upon methodology in their country is actually the Hanbali school. And I'm mentioning this because some things can be easily dismissed when we understand the world we live in. So how is it good for you that you have a source of where you get legal rulings, you have a methodology and a structure and a curriculum to make that judge, to make that mufti, and then when you get to Negroes, excuse me, all that changes. Just do anything. You don't find that highly offensive? Like, when it comes to us, all that just go out the window. For you, it's established. And guess what? If in Saudi Arabia, you attempt to upset that, they will put you in prison. But you can come to our communities and just be free with it. I want you to think. This is not a debate. This is a fact. So that means this is some devious stuff because you have one standard for your people, and then when it comes to us, there's a whole nother standard. And we're made to think that someone is actually arguing our argument, and they're not. They're not even paying us no attention. They've already deceived us. We're done. I want us to really think about that. You're done. Before you even get started, you're done. So you're not in the discussion. We've given you an Islam that will never work, that no one in history has ever tried to apply. That's why it don't work in our communities, because it's not right. And they gave it to us like that intentionally. Because it's not like they don't know, because they have it for themselves. For us, it's a double standard. Our job is to critically think of what's happening, recognize the error, and begin to fix it. They didn't give us access. Now we got to go get it. Y'all follow me? So when I started, we're talking about access and understanding what we're talking about. This is extremely important. So the tools of understanding is not even there. And most of us actually believe that we have tools that we don't have. Imagine Imam Naeem's electrician. If I go to do electric work with no tools, what's going to happen? Imam Naeem, you the electrician here.
You're going to be standing there asking to borrow my tools, and I ain't giving it to you.
You're never going to get the job done. You need tools, right or wrong. Can I wire a house with no tools?
Yeah, in theory, in your mind.
They stripped us of the tools. Until we realize that, we're never going to solve this problem. we first have to admit we don't have the tools. And then we got to get educated on what tools we need. I'm gonna stop there because I just expanded this. Now I have to tell you the tools, and that's going to be more of this discussion. It's going to be extended because we actually have to discover what the tools we need. And I'll stop there. I got to go pray.
Alhamdulillah. Imam Amin mentioned a lot of points. And one of the points he mentioned, he said that when we're talking about, following madhabs, and, there's this kind of idea that, from my experience, and some of you have experienced as well, it's almost as if you're following a particular madhab, then you might be missing out on another, source of knowledge as far as another hadith. So, for instance, if you follow, the Hanafi school, they have certain ways that they do things and they use their proofs. And then, in the Maliki school, Shafi and Hanbali school, and you often come across this thing about where people be like, okay, well, what about this hadith? And you might not heard in the school. And so people will make you think that, you have to follow the hadith over the madhab. And that's what the tools that Imam Amin was talking about. You have to know how to use these tools and how to apply the Quran and Hadith. That's what fiqh is. How do you apply it? And you have to be qualified to have a tool, because the tool in the hand of a wrong person is not trained is a disaster. Just imagine somebody picking up a electric wire that's hot and they trying to put them together. Somebody getting fried, And so not only are the right tools important, but the person who has the tools, they have to know how to use them, And in that sense, every hadith is not applicable, even if it's authentic, And that's another part we have to learn about, because this is, we talk about that region where people, come from, and they put this on us, having us thinking that, and now, and this the other part of the slogan that they use is Quran and authentic Sunnah. Right. So, as if some parts of the Sunnah are inauthentic, and then authentic according to who, and so they will have you think that, okay, almost as if you're denying a hadith if you don't follow hadith in your school, but if we apply this in just, in other ways, right, when you follow the madhab, for instance, say if you sign up for the service, and you go to the army, and you go to the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, all of those different armed forces are going to have basic training, right? But whatever force you join, it's going to be all that, You're not going to be in the Army and then they teach you what the Navy's doing. You're not going to be in the Navy and then you learn what the Marines are doing. When you're in the Army, everything is Army. When you're in the Navy, everything is about Navy and the curriculum that they teach you. Yeah, you don't go ask the person what's their dalil, or well, in the Army they do this, or in the Marines they do this. No, you're in the Navy, you do what the Navy does. If you want to be in the Army, you join the Army. And so that's how we have to look at when we follow madhabs. It's one school, and you have to be proficient in that school. And some of the terms that Imam Amin was mentioning about taqlid, and another problem that's come up is a term that's called talfiq. Talfiq is kind of mixing between the schools, and this is very dangerous for a person who is not trained and who is not qualified to do so. And that's 90% of us. That's 90% of us that we just can't go and read these different views of the different jurists and then think that we could just extract our own understanding. This is very harmful, and sometimes it's just about humility of following your school. Following the madhab is another analogy I give is that if you ever had a job, right, and you went on a job, and there's a job that you apply for, and you may have even trained for, right, but when you go to that job, what they do, the first thing is that if you get hired, they have orientation. They have orientation. And so when they have orientation, they explain to you all of the do's and the don'ts, the ins and the outs, the expectations, the rules, and all of that. And I'll put it on everything that I own, right? Which ain't much, but I guarantee you nobody was ever in orientation, stood up and said, well, what's your proof for this? I guarantee you nobody would ever be in the orientation for a job training and ask questions. They'll be taking down notes and figure out how they will have to follow with the instructions that they've been given, right? And that's the same thing in following the madhab. Someone is training you, giving you an orientation. That's what following the madhab is. You're getting an orientation of how to follow Islamic legal rulings. And then you just follow, you know, and you just follow. It's all rules, you know, and you have to know the rules to follow them, you know, and we don't just make up rules as we go. And so this is very important because this thing about, you know, just Quran and Sunnah and, you know, not following the madhab and even making it appear as if following the madhab is just like, you know, is what the Imam said, you know. And this is another point too. If someone is trained in the field and they're an expert, don't you follow expert opinions? Even if we were to go with this argument that this is the opinions of men and all that, don't you follow expert opinions in any other field? Why not in Islam when people are trained? Why is it that we become Muslim and then we think we can question everything and try to verify anything? Or the one I love is that people be like, I got to look that up. You get a ruling from a scholar and somebody that you talking about, I got to look that up, or where can I find it? You don't even know where to begin to look to find something, you know, and then you want to ask the person, where can I find that hadith at? In a hadith book. Joker. Yeah, but that kind of stuff, you know, and we have to really go back and realize that we just don't know, and this is just enough to follow. You know, I mean, somebody try to put this on us to think that it's like, you know, beneath us to just follow, you know, but we do it in every other facet of our lives. We do it in every other facet. We go to the doctor, we go to the professional, we go to the mechanic, and we follow their advice, you know, and we might ask some questions, the things that might not be sure. And then when they explain to us, oh, now how about the people in the madhabs, and each one of them have verified scholars that learn from a scholar, that learn from a scholar, that learn from a scholar, all the way back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then we want to ask, well, what's their dalil? Or we want to imply that some of them didn't know hadith, or they didn't know dalil, or they missed this, you know, and that's really crazy. That really bugs me out, you know. And so this is why this stuff is important, following what's already been tried and true, you know. And like I said earlier, following the madhahib is just following the finished product. You know, like if you go to the supermarket, you get a finished product off the shelf. You know, you don't go to the store owner and be like, okay, what was the process of how they made this peanut butter, right? Or how did they put this together in the bag? You know, some of us, we barely read the ingredients of the stuff we eat, right? We eating finished products, you know what I mean? But there was a process beforehand that we trusted, you know? And that's the whole thing about, you know, the madhab. This is a trusted authority that you're following, not just anybody who's coming up, you know, out the side of their neck with rulings. This is trusted authority figures in Islam who have already have all of the tools and all of the qualifications. And so, you know, we really had to get back to this. And because, you know, many of us in our locales, especially where we are, us three as imams, that we're up against this all day. You have a person coming to Masjid, and it's so often, you know, and, you know, you hear them recite Al-Fatiha, and you just say, SubhanAllah, you know. But then they'll be quick to ask you, you know, where's this hadith found, you know, or that hadith is not in this, you know, or that hadith is weak, as if they graded it, you know. So then you ask them stuff. Well, what is a weak hadith? How many categories of weak hadith are there? How do you use a weak hadith? You know, are you don't use them at all, or what's the process? And then you start asking questions, and they be like, nah, this is weak. We don't use weak hadith. And okay, we're done here. Yeah, but this is the stuff that we up against, And then you ask a brother, man, you be like, "Kayfa halik, akhi?" He be like, "Tawheed." Really? Yeah, this is the stuff that we up, man. I mean, I hear people now. I'm not no expert in Arabic, but I know when I hear Arabic words, and I know when I hear them mispronounced. And I be hearing people mispronounce words, and people be like, "Oh man, the brother knows Arabic." SubhanAllah. Yeah, but this is the stuff that we really need the training, and go back to understanding that our only obligation is to follow when we don't know. And really, that's how you learn, And Islam, the one thing about following these authorities in religious instruction, right, and following the madhahib, is that they come, it's a divine process. All of this goes back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam instructing his companions and letting them know what's right and what's wrong, and being clear in issues that's been passed down. And all of this been documented and codified. And so when you're following those schools, that's where it comes from. You don't have to do a lot of work. You don't have to do no, quote unquote, independent research about an issue, because you're not sure if the hadith is sahih, and you don't even know the classifications of hadith, So, man, we got so much work to do, And this the other thing, Imam Amin was mentioning about sometimes how we translate words. Taqlid is really not blind following. It's imitation of scholarship. It's imitation of a religious authority, That's the same way if you go on an orientation in a job, and then this a job that you applied for, even if you faked it, how they talk about those jobs you applied for, and it was all good until you really had your qualifications and you lied on the application. But when you're on orientation, you paying attention to everything they saying, right? You taking down notes, you making mental notes about what they're saying. They walking you through the facility and tell you this is what they do over here, this is what they do over there. And you're not asking the person why. You're not asking the person for their evidence. You're not asking the person for the process. You're just taking it all in and figure out how you're going to do the job, right? And so why is that a problem in Islam when we have people who, we read the biographies of the scholars that have come before us. These people were remarkable people, and the work that they've done so that we can have the ease in following. I mean, subhanAllah, may Allah who subhanahu wa ta'ala bless them all. And, may Allah bless them all. I mean. But this is very important, and we've lost this tradition of just following, just following and admit that you don't know and that you have to learn, or we have to learn, So, all right, that's all I have. I'm going to go off it real quick too, and then I'll drop it off to the genes.
Man, Faheem, why you do that, man? You got me thinking of all of these wild mispronunciations in my head.
I know, ain't there something bad? Brother be like,
I wish you didn't do that.
Wallahi
Deen.
Yeah. Astaghfirullah.
I even heard Astaghfirullah.
Subhanallah. Assigning a staff to Allah, man. A staff of Allah. Oh, man. Subhanallah.
Subhanallah. Oh, man. I got to try to stop laughing. But it's funny how you mentioned that, because before I pass it back to Imam Amin, it is wild because just like two different incidents which highlights what we're talking about that came to mind. Back in, I think it was like 1999, when I was on my personal journey from following Quran and Sunnah, do it yourself, default Wahhabi status, me, myself. And I was just getting exposed to, Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah. In that period of transition and growth, and I pray that I'm still growing in my life, I happened to be given a lecture in the Bronx, New York, at a masjid. And sometime before the lecture, a brother had told me that there was a brother who uh, be going to all the different lectures. This was back when there used to be lectures everywhere, every weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. In most major cities, there was lectures, vendors, Muslims getting together, everything popping off. Right. So this brother told me that, yo, there's this brother, he be going around, and he knew Shahada too. He be going around challenging all the imams. I think he coming today. So I'm like, oh, all right, okay. So in the lecture, I talked about the necessity of following the method. And somewhere in the lecture, I quoted Surah 4, Ayah 59. O you who believe, obey Allah and obey His Messenger and those charged with authority among you. And if you differ in anything, refer it back to Allah and His Messenger. And that is better and more suitable if indeed you do believe in Allah and the last day. So the lecture's over. Everybody's outside. And the brother comes to me and he starts engaging me. First, he started by showering me with a whole bunch of compliments that I know don't fit me. As we used to say back in the day, he was beating me in the head. And so we would say, okay, let me get my helmet. He's beating me in the head. Instead of rocking me to sleep like he probably thought he was doing, he actually put my guard up. And when he started talking, the other brother who told me that this brother's coming, he said, yeah, this is the brother I was telling you about. I was like, all right, double red flag. All right, cool. Here we go. So he said, I think you a sheikh, you knowledgeable. Oh God, here we go. Right. And so he said, I just have one question, one issue. You said it's our obligation to follow a method. I said, yeah, I said that. But we supposed to follow Quran and Sunnah. And you refuted yourself in your own lecture. I said, I refuted myself. Huh? He said, yeah. I said, how did I refute myself? He said, you said you got to obey Allah and His Messenger. You quoted the ayat. And those charged with authority among you. And if you differ, refer back to Allah and His Messenger. I said, yes. He said, that's refuting yourself. I said, okay. I asked him a question. I said, brother, do you know what sababul nuzul means? He said, nah. I said, huh. I said, do you know what ilmu rijal means? He said, nah. Wait a minute. So let me get a little bit more basic. Those are basic terms. I said, okay, let me get a little bit more basic. I said, do you know what tafsir means? He said, no. I said, do you know what shahr means? He said, no. I said, brother, I just gave you some basic elementary terms that are about commentaries or explanations of the Quran and the Hadith. Some basic terms, and I defined each term. I said, you don't even know what those words mean. So when Allah says, Furuduhu ilallahi wa rasulihi, refer back to Allah and His Messenger. How are you going to refer back to Allah and His Messenger? You who only follow Quran and Sunnah, and you don't even understand basic terminology relating to Quran and Sunnah. How are you going to refer back to Allah and His Messenger? By this time, some people had gathered, and you know how we do. Everything's a rap battle, right? So everybody's like, woo, woo, right? And he was like, all right, you got that, you got that, you got that. That's what's up. Inshallah, next time I see you, I'm gonna have something for you. Like, what? This was like like I said, 1999. And I said, wait a minute, when you take Shahada? Because I remember the brother told me he was a new Shahada. He said, about 6 months ago. I said, you've been Muslim for 6 months and you going to every lecture challenging every imam? I said, man, you gotta learn. You can't be doing that, man. I said, you need to humble yourself and learn. He said, yeah, I know. When I see you, I'm gonna have something for you. I'm like, this dude think this is we battling and rapping and stuff. And so I mentioned that because our situation is so dire. It's worse than that. That was uh almost what 15 years ago? No, that was 25 years ago. It's worse than that now. It's worse than that. Another situation. I had given a khutbah. The khutbah was about differences of opinion. And in this masjid, there were a lot of different factions. Some Wahhabi, Ahl Sunnah, and everybody was going at each other's throat. So I gave a Jumu'ah khutbah about the validity. Yeah, the khutbah with an R at the end, Ra. Kha, Ta, no, Kha, Ta, Ba, Ra. I had given a khutbah in the masjid about difference of opinion. And I was coming from an usul fiqh perspective, explaining how differences of opinion are valid and legitimate and existed during the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In the khutbah, I gave proofs for those. And then I remember I gave some examples of differences of opinion. And of course, some of us were Maliki, so I used the issue of Sadhu, which is when you pray and your hands are by your side as opposed to being crossed right over left. So most of the people appreciated the khutbah, but some of the immigrant Wahhabis, they went back and told this brother, I don't know why they told him like he was supposed to mean something. I guess he was their local knowledgeable guy or something. So he comes, I think by this time it may be Asr time. He comes and tells me in his broken English that he heard I gave a khutbah. And he heard that I said that it's okay to pray with your hands by your side. I said, yeah, I said it. So in his broken English, he asked me with all due respect for my proof. This time, and I rarely do that, I had my khutbah printed out. So every hadith that I mentioned, whatever, was printed out. And I just so happened to still have it in my pocket at the time. So he asked me for my proof. So I pulled out the papers, went to the page, and said, here. And the hadith that he was questioning appears in the Sunan of Abi Dawud. And so he looks at it and he says, can you bring the book to me? I'm like, I ain't bringing you no book, man. You ain't important. Like, I got to bring a book. You're supposed to be Big Sheikh. You don't have a Sunan Abi Dawud in your house? Come on, man. Like I'm a lie on the paper. You supposed to be Quran and Sunnah. You supposed to know this stuff, right? And so he said, I don't agree. I was, so what? Your agreement is not necessary. Like you ain't nobody. Like what? You don't agree. Whoop-de-doo. Whoop-de-doo is a term that one of the previous imams of Masjid al-Mu'min, Imam Tariq Rahimahullah, he used to say, when somebody would say something that they thought was deep or special, but it wasn't, he'd be like, whoop-de-doo. So I mentioned those two situations really to highlight how, just to say it another way, when they say it usually in terms of politics and social issues, the mental patient is running the insane asylum. The mental patient is running the insane asylum. Common people who are not even qualified to be students are asking for proof and talking about they follow Quran and Sunnah and rejecting true and bona fide scholarship. That's the reality of our situation that my imams had just mentioned. I think those of us, we have to recognize that the mental patient is running the insane asylum and we need to leave. and we need to recognize that we've been deprived of access and been deprived of the tools and been deprived of all of these things, and we need to go get it. In the same way that a lot of us, when we were young, we messed up our younger years running around and fooling around and doing nonsense instead of getting trained, so that when we got in our late 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, and you know, and we have responsibilities, we don't have to take these low paying jobs. We have a skill set where we can earn some decent money or start a business, right? Some of us, we figure we learned that lesson a little bit too late. And so using that parable, I'm saying for us, what we need to do is not just sit down and be like, oh, well, I blew it. I didn't go to college. I didn't take a trade when I was 19 and 20. So I'm just stuck being a Walmart greeter. No, don't let that be you. Hello, welcome to Walmart. Am I help you? No, don't let that be you. It's never too late to go back to school for anything. You got people in their 80s, 90s, over 100 memorizing Quran, learning other subjects. If they can memorize Quran in their 80s, 90s, over 100, we can learn our basics. We can go back and recognize we've been deprived of all of that stuff and learn it. Don't get stuck. Don't stay there. Doesn't matter. I don't care how many mental patients tell you that they run in the show. Alhamdulillah.
MashaAllah, time goes fast. We don't have enough time to cover what I wanted to cover. But inshallah.
Yes, we do. You ain't on that 3-hour stuff today?
Oh, it gets soft, man.
Yeah, man.
You've been domesticated?
Don't like that.
You've been domesticated.
Yeah, I've been domesticated, bro.
Domesticated.
I don't know. If I keep doing that, I'll be sounding like, the arcade guy, can't sleep. But I'll say this. I want to go back quickly to the point I was making, because it's very important. We put up 4 agreed upon sources from which legal rulings are extracted. Can y'all put those 4 back up real quick? I want to show you something with that. Because we're talking about when we're talking about fiqh, we're talking about legal rulings. Can we put those 4? Could everyone put the 4 that we mentioned? Those 4 sources by which we extract legal rulings, meaning we Sunni Muslims. I don't mean us ourselves. Can y'all put those 4 sources up, primary sources back? Everyone, inshallah. So we make sure we were all following. Don't be shy. If you just get this stage, I'm happy with that. We can build. Okay. So in not 4 schools, Habibi, 4 sources of legal rulings. So when we talk about the Quran and the Sunnah alone, in each of those, the one who extracts legal rulings from the Quran and from the Sunnah, in order to extract legal rulings, there is a condition. He needs to know which verses and which hadith pertain to legal rulings. So if he's going to extract legal rulings, anyone, from the Quran and Sunnah, he needs to know which verses from the Quran and which hadith from the Sunnah pertain to legal rulings. Right? Everyone got that? I'm going to make it easy. I'm not going to ask you. There are roughly verses that pertain to legal rulings around 500. Hadith, about the same, around 500 hadith with various narrations that pertain to legal rulings. Could y'all write that down? Can we put it up so we make sure everyone got it? Now, so there are 500 roughly verses of the Quran that particularly pertain to legal rulings. And then in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, with multiple narrations, there are about 500 hadith that apply to legal rulings. That's what the scholars who that's their expertise, they mention that. Now, the question becomes for us, and we could be a scale for analogy purposes. How many of us, even those who memorize the whole Quran, right, know which verses particularly pertain to legal rulings? How many of us are like that? So those 500 verses, we know ourselves independently those 500 verses. Even if you know the whole Quran, I'll give you a half of the Quran. Tell me ayatul ahkam, the verses that apply to legal rulings. Tell me them. How many of us, because we're going to be the analogy. I'm not one of them. I don't know. So I count me out. Imam Faheem, Mufti Anam.
You have to count me out.
No, we got to be honest with ourselves. So therefore, none of us, we all agree, have the ability to follow the Quran, because we're talking about legal rulings, and we don't even know which verses pertain to legal rulings, and all of them and their applicability to the legal ruling itself. We don't know that. So what does that mean, since we don't know? What does that mean for us from last week? فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلِ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask the people of knowledge if you don't know. So all of us going to have to follow someone else, because none of us, we said, have that knowledge. You see how fast we just dismembered this false body of knowledge that we claim we have? I follow Quran and Sunnah. Okay, now in the Quran, you're talking about just verses. Now let's move that. Maybe you didn't know the Quran. Let's move to the hadith. Those verses, those ahadith, So ahadith al-ahkam, those hadith that relate to legal rulings. With the hadith, there is an added thing. You're going to have different narrations of wording of hadith in various books, right? Is there any among us who know those hadith that relate to legal rulings that have an impact on the judgment that we have in those acts of worship that we're talking about, or those dealings, or those family issues, or those crimes and punishments? Do we have that knowledge? I'm walking us through our own delusion, right? I'm walking us through our own delusion so we can get out of that stuff. Because someone has deluded us and told us we possess things that we don't possess. So maybe if we get that out of our mind, we'll stop imagining ourselves to be something we're not. And then we'll follow the Quran for real, and we'll start asking those who have that knowledge, right? Okay, tell you. So now there is another aspect with that. If you knew those rulings, you knew those verses, and you knew those hadith, and we don't, there is a third aspect after we said primary source, which is called what? We said Al-Quran, As-Sunnah, and then we got a third one, which is that. Let's put it back up. What is that third one we mentioned? I wanted to show us some stuff, right? Because the Roundtable is supposed to be something we learn. We walk away with something, right? Al-Ijma. Al-Ijma means scholarly consensus. Let me add that. That's qualified scholarly consensus. Qualified scholarly consensus. What does that mean? Whenever we have a legal ruling, some legal rulings have complete scholarly consensus in meaning on them, and some of those rulings have differences of opinion. Do we know, any of us, the legal rulings that have scholarly consensus upon them? Do we know those? I don't. Is anyone here who knows I don't say all, the vast majority of legal rulings upon which there is scholarly consensus? Does any of us know that knowledge? So even if we knew the rulings, we knew the verses or the hadith, do we know which ones there is scholarly consensus upon them? Meaning that the scholars of Islam, from the companions or the followers of the followers of the followers, or in any generation, agreed on that legal ruling. We don't. So hence, we cannot be sure that when we make a legal ruling on our own, that we're not contradicting what the vast majority of qualified scholars among us have agreed is an absolute definitive legal ruling. You're not even sure if you're contradicting the very sources that you're supposed to follow as a Sunni Muslim. You don't have that knowledge. Let's move to the fourth one. I'm just giving you by way of example. So you got to know, that scholar needs to know between those verses and hadith that lead to legal rulings. You got to identify them first, then know which one is scholarly consensus, which one is a difference of opinion, what are valid differences of opinion, what are considered deviant difference of opinion. He has to know that, because he's going to apply that legal ruling to someone's life. If he doesn't know that, he's going to make gross errors. All right, so let's move to qiyas. Al-qiyas. Al-qiyas is what? It's scholarly deductive analogy. What does that mean? The Islamic law is not a dinosaur. In other words, it is suitable for every time and place. So the sacred law is, the Sharia of Islam is suitable for every time and place. How is that done? If we have new events, new circumstances, is that are not mentioned or didn't exist in the time of the Prophet ﷺ or his companions, what do we do with those new cases? What is the legal ruling for them? Because we're talking about legal rulings. You have new cases. They didn't happen in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. They didn't happen in the time of the companions. They didn't happen in the times of the followers, at tabi'een. It didn't happen in the time of atba'i tabi'een. And do we realize that the nature of life and everything that we do is a part of life, that there's going to be circumstances, situations that we need a legal ruling that did not exist in the time of the Prophet ﷺ or the Salaf? Do we realize that? I'm asking a question. Do we realize that? I hope we not like, we should realize we live in a world that's constantly changing, and it's been changing over and over. And every time and place, aren't there new cases that come up that didn't exist before? iPhones didn't exist. Internet didn't exist. All these means that we got right now, they didn't exist. There are legal rulings applied to them. From where do we get these legal rulings? You sell a hadith that tells you whether you can use Google or not, whether you can use Facebook or not, and the limits and the boundaries and the rules and the conditions. Do you find that in the Quran, in the Sunnah, in and of itself, explicitly from a verse? Is any of us qualified to do that? So that means there's going to be some kind of deductive analogy. What is deductive analogy? That is going to take a new case that didn't exist in the past, and you're going to make an analogy from a case that is similar to it to give a legal ruling. That takes knowing some stuff. You can't not know the verses of Ahkam, not know the hadith, not know the circumstances by which those rulings were applied, and how the companions and the followers of the followers judged in those cases. Because you have a ruling, how did they actually implement that ruling? What was the way? There were judges, there were scholars, there were people, they did deal with these cases. How did they deal with them? And how do those rulings apply to what we're doing? What is the way we make this analogy? And what are the types of analogy? Any of us know this stuff? This is law we're talking about. This is law. We don't. We have to be honest. So for us, that whole concept necessitates, by what we understand from real, that we must follow qualified scholarship. Would we all agree? Do we have consensus on that we need to follow qualified scholarship? I think we can agree with that, right? From what we talked, what we laid out, just in this, isn't it agreed upon us that we need to follow qualified scholarship? Does any one of us start saying right now, after this discussion, I can do it myself? If you are, then that insane asylum and the inmates is running it that Imam Naeem was talking about, we it, right? If you start telling me, but that's what we do. Now, are we not in our masjids? Are we not in our living rooms? Are we not in our kitchens and on the internet and in our families acting like we have this knowledge? Are we not doing that? there's a hadith and I read in the Quran and as if you're a jurist. This is foolish. I'm trying to lift the veil from us. Wake us up first. Listen, we're actually running around the insane asylum doing our stuff. Right? Like we tripping, right? But we don't realize we tripping. So we gotta first establish, we gotta fix this stuff. Because that's, okay. Let's go to the guy who's coming back. I graduated from the University of Medina and I'm the sheikh now. And I'm coming back to straighten all you ignorant people out. The average person that graduates from an Islamic university, the average person, how many years of actual university studies do he do? I want to ask you a question. Does anyone know? He goes to University of Medina. He goes to Al-Azhar. I don't care where he goes. How many years does he actually study in the university? Does anyone know? In the university, he actually will study between 4 to 6 years. Yeah. Right? Tops. In the university, actually. And then he may go to PhD, but when he comes out, that's what comes back to us. After 4 or 5 years, the other years, then you say he was over there for 6, 7, that was because he was learning Arabic. He was in an Arabic program before he even went into university. His actual stay in the university is no longer than 6 years, average 4, right? Tell you. Do you know the average scholar spends 20 years in his field? In his field, 20, with his teacher, before he's actually making legal rulings, real legal, I'm talking about classical scholars, real ulama, in his field. I'm not talking about he got all this stuff. In his field, he's going to have 20 years of actual work. But this guy's coming back and he's talking about, I'm on the Quran and Sunnah and I'm a student of knowledge and I study with the ulama. You need to go sit down. Let me lift the veil. When the guy finish, he may be qualified to read the books of the scholars. He may, listen, may. He may be qualified to read the books of the scholars. I ain't talking about he know what's in them. He may be qualified to read them. The average guy who finishes those schools has not read a curriculum of books from cover to cover, not one in that university. Have nothing but a bunch of cliff notes. Has not read a classical book from cover to cover with a teacher explaining, giving to, you can't do it in 4 years. It's not happening. By their own admission, a very basic book will take them, the way they teach, 6, 7 years to finish one book. This is real conversation. But they coming back, operating on us. Experimenting. Think about this stuff. But here's the catch, with no end to it. So every little young buck think about it. Come on, we got to use critical thinking. The kid that graduates from college, is he ready to do anything? Even in the field he studies, he does 4 years, 6 years. Is he trusted with leadership and scholarship and making legal, and now we're talking about legal rulings. Is any kid like that? Let's be honest. No. So how do we take our hereafter and convert it to that? And these kids, even if they're older, are actually challenging scholars who spent 50, 60 years in studying with living teachers, memorizing books, and they're talking about hum rijal wa nahnu rijal. They men and we men. This is insanity. But guess what? It's normal for us. And we just say, okay, I'm giving you, and I'm going to lay this out. I'm just giving you, because we didn't even touch what you need to do in one school, let alone all four. Like you get this crazy guy who says, you know, I compare all four schools and I picked the best. This dude is insane. He doesn't realize it. He's crazy. I got a call while I was on the phone. I'll share. I won't mention names. No, I won't mention names, right? Someone was telling me about a case. And I told the person, I said, this case you're talking about, the people involved are not sane. Don't talk to them. Just tell them, go somewhere else. They're not sane. Don't try to reason with them. It's insanity. The person said to me, he said, yeah, it wasn't making sense. I said, yeah, he's insane. Don't have that conversation. It's not making sense. We're having conversations that don't make no sense. They don't. When we learn, right? Do y'all follow what I'm saying? And I'm not being critical of anyone. I'm trying to tell us the whole world is looking at us, and this is our state. And they know better. And they have all these processes developed. They're building nations. And this is what we're talking. This is where we're at. We have to fix it. And the first step to fixing it is admitting we don't know and we need to learn. Seriously. Right? Because we can't even give someone a curriculum who thinks they've mastered the curriculum before they even saw it. I'm at the highest level of scholarship. I'm actually doing my own legal deductions. The person doesn't even know how to do legal deductions. I'm going to ask you, and I'll close with this. You don't know me, most of you. Some of you do, but most of you don't know me personally. If I told you I built a bridge that's 2 miles long, goes across the ocean, it's a suspension bridge. I designed it. Who's crossing that bridge? I'm asking you. Most of you don't know me. Some of you do. Who's going to cross that bridge? Who's going to drive their car across that bridge? Imam Naeem, you ain't going across my bridge, Ak? I thought we was tight.
No, I'm good.
Imam Faheem, I know you going across my bridge.
Man, I ain't never know you to be no bridge builder, cuz.
Listen, the most can happen to you. If the bridge collapses, you're going to die and go to Jannah. What's the problem? Don't you want to go to paradise?
Man, I got to go to work in the morning, man.
We do worse with our religion. We do worse with our religion. The guy is operating on our soul, building on our soul, and we won't say anything. We actually give it consideration. That part we got to fix. So I just laid it out. And that's just without giving evidences and verses. I just want to know, I want to mention part, just very little of what it takes, right? And how are you going to really do it and you don't even know what it takes? It's impossible. And for us, we got to first admit and then start learning what it takes. And then we got to actually do it. So there's going to be some of us that have to do those 20 years that I was talking about, 30 years after learning, after memorizing, right? And knowing that curriculum and actually go through it. I want to ask, last question. We're testing each other. We're you know how every time you go into a field, they give you like what's they call it? Pretest. Or like pretest exam. Here's your pretest.
A quiz.
Quiz. But just to see what you know. It's no grade or nothing, just to see what you know. Placement test. Right? How many of us have studied 10 books, Islamic books, from cover to cover, with explanation, with a living teacher who studied those books from a living teacher? 10 books, any 10 books. I don't care what they are. How many say me? I want to meet you. 10 books, cover to cover, with a living teacher who studied with a living teacher, those books cover to cover. Anyone? Anyone? I mean, it's a lot of people. We on the internet. There's a lot of people out here. You didn't say that because no, different books. In anything. Different books from cover to cover. Right? Let me explain something to you. If you didn't study 10 books, in one field, a major book may be 10 or more volumes in one field. So if we're talking about just fiqh, in one madhab, the major books in one madhab, whether it's Maliki fiqh or Hanbali fiqh or Shafi'i fiqh or Hanafi, just one book of the major book is over 10 volumes. That's just one book in one aspect. And we ain't did none of that. And we making legal rulings. And someone convinced us that. Did we establish a point to start from? Huh? Did we, I mean, honest, let's be honest with each other. Did we at least have a start that we could start really being realistic? And it's not to put us down, it's to wake us up. Because we have work to do. This cannot be generation after generation we talking like this. No. The next generation, we got to make a concerted effort that they don't have this kind of conversation. At least they started the process, right? Our children, at least they have access. But if we keep doing this stuff, they're not going to even have access. And I talk to elders that have been in Islam for 50, 60 years, and they can't answer these questions. And here we are 60 years later, and we still can't answer the questions. What does that tell you? We have work to do. We have to actually change. It is a must that we change. And even if we can't do it, we got to plant the seeds. So all we're really doing is planting the seeds. We're not making a claim. We're saying this is what we got to do. And you can't keep fooling us. We're going to have to do the work. Even if we're not capable, we're going to have to build capacity. I'm not capable. I'm old. I'm shot. Can't read more than 20 pages. And that's exaggeration without going to sleep. I can't do it. Right? It's not happening. Right? That needs the kid who can read for 3 hours straight. That's what that requires. He's got to read all these volumes, thousands of pages of works. He's got to cross-reference. He's got to compare. He's got to evaluate. He's got to read books of hadith, books of tafsir, books of language. books of usul fiqh, books of fiqh. He can't be like me with kids and a job and worrying about how you're going to pay the bills. He can't do that. It's impossible. It'll never happen. His brain not even fit for that. So you see the work we got to do? We got to be honest here. And I mean, living in delusion has not helped us. And you know what? I'm just going to get political for a minute. If you look at our country and you look, how many of you with honesty are looking at the political situation and actually feel like it don't matter? When you look at this political, the options you have in this country right now, just to be honest, I'm not saying who you're going to vote for, who you're not. How many of you actually listening and watching and be like, man, we doomed? I'm one of them. Imam Naeem, sure, you vote? Think about it.
We've been doomed. It's just honest. It's just obvious now.
Right. And we looking and we say that like, man, this does not look like beautiful choices, right? And think about it. Just think about it. If they could have continued to play the games that they play, we wouldn't even have this option. We'd be in a worse situation because they would have just let us drag us right down the road. Like, when we think about it, don't just look at that in the world. That's happening to us in the deen too. And we have to fix it. Right? We have to fix it. We have the obligation to work our tails off to fix this stuff. But we've been programmed to not even begin the process. That's through delusion. We have to lift the delusion from us so we can start the work. And Allah knows best. We're going to continue, inshallah, and I'm going to lay this out even more next week. I'm going to lay it out more. We'll go deeper and deeper and deeper because this ain't a little subject. It has a lot of details to it. But we got to take it in doses, inshallah. And Allah knows best. If there's any quick questions, any muftis who want to give fatwa, ahlan wa sahlan, we're ready. I am mufti called in Quba.
Any mujtahid mutlaqs want to make themselves known?
Yeah, go ahead. Jump out there. But listen, the first step to recovery is admitting you have a problem. Let's admit our problem and let's start working on it. We ain't saying give up. We saying we got a problem. Let's admit it. Let's discover where the problem is. Let's start fixing it. That's our work. I'm good for tonight unless somebody got questions. Oh, there is one. Where's that at? This was a statement, and I wanted to touch it real quick. Person said, if I can't grade a hadith for myself, but accept Sheikh Al-Albani's grading, then I just made taqleed, which is imitating to Sheikh Al-Albani, most likely without knowledge of his methodology. This is very important. When that guy, like Imam Naeem was saying, is the hadith weak or is the hadith sound or authentic? Most of the people saying that don't know how that process even works. So they're actually following Al-Albani or whoever. Sometimes they don't even follow Al-Albani. It ain't Al-Albani because he ain't the only one doing weighing, grading hadith among them. Sometimes they following the local guy in the masjid who's Amin, be nice, right? I was getting ready to go there, Imam Faheem, but I'm going to be nice, right? Sometimes they are beginner students that graduated from the university doing that. He doesn't know what he's doing. What it takes to grade a hadith, we're going to talk about some of it next week. And once you know what it takes to grade a hadith, you stop that stuff. And by the way, grading a hadith is not agreed upon. That is a subjective matter, even among the scholars. What someone says is weak don't mean other scholars necessarily, and I mean qualified scholars I'm talking about, agree that it's weak. There are other details that in determining the strength of authenticity of a hadith, it's not just so-and-so said it and that's it. No, it doesn't work that way. So that's a whole nother field. But so most of the people that are saying that, they're really blind following because they don't even know nothing about that stuff. But they actually, all right, stop it, man. That boy, you got to control those nifs. Let it go. Nah, okay. All right, that was the question. Go ahead, Imam Naeem.
Let your nafs go. Feel it.
I let it go. I did.
No, don't let it. Let
No,
it.
I can't feed that.
Let it consume you.
It'll distract from the point. They'd be like, we gotta go one round table without hitting somebody up. Right? All right, go. Y'all want to take that question? Oh, that's for Khan.
You know, for Khan's questions, you know, you might hit that 3-hour mark. When we say the scholars said, what scholars are we talking about? And what scholars are the Wahhabis talking about when they say it as well? I know when we are saying scholars, especially when we're talking about these issues, we are talking like when we talk about Quran and Sunnah and stuff, we were talking about the mujtahids, the mujtahid scholars, those highest ranking level of scholars who have the qualifications to go directly to the primary sources themselves and extract rulings from them. The second part of your question, I can't answer that.
Let's be fair. Remember, we put this word insaf. Can y'all all copy that? Remember that word insaf? Fairness. Can we all copy that? Just make sure we all got a term. We build our Arabic vocabulary up. Insaf. We need to learn that too. Us collectively as a people. We're at war. People trying to subjugate us, misguide us. So we got to pick up some stuff. So insaf. When we say scholars, anyone who says he's Sunni is going to refer to the same scholars. It's a matter of how we interpreting things, right? That's fair. So the Wahhabis, when they're talking about hadith, they're talking about the same scholars we're talking about in terms of where their scholars they're referring to are referring to. No, nobody is just out of the blue making up stuff. No one's doing that. Scholars, quote unquote. Not even Al-Albani. He's not just making it up. He's getting it from somewhere. Our job is to go check his sources. That's our job. He's not making it up. Even things that he's totally incorrect in, he has a basis by which he's got that mistake. He didn't just shoot it out his head. He's understanding things incorrectly. He's not have full information. He made mistakes. And sometimes his reasoning led him to those mistakes. like anybody. So our job is to eventually get enough knowledge where we can go research what he's talking about ourselves. That's a task for us. It's not sufficient to say because Al-Albani said it, it's wrong. That's not insaf. Al-Albani may have been 100% correct in the issue and you just don't know it, right? And he may have been 1,000% wrong and you don't know it. So among us, we have to have people that can actually check that stuff, right? I'll tell you a story about this. I didn't like Al-Albani at all, and still today I'm not his best fan, right? One of my teachers, who I am a fan of, I wanted to read the books of his teacher, who was a hadith scholar. He said, I'm not giving you the books of my teacher until you read the books of Al-Albani. I will never forget this lesson. I looked at him. I was like, man, what kind of deviant is he? Right? I was young. That's what I said. This dude's a straight deviant. He's talking about read Al-Albani's books. And he had close connection to his teacher, high chain of narration, and I wanted it bad, and that was the only way I could get it. So he gave me all these Al-Albani books, and I remember spending quite a long time researching and reading these books, right? When I finished what he had asked me to do, he had a specific thing in mind. He was teaching me a lesson. So it wasn't every single thing, it was certain things. So I read these books and I researched, and then he finally gave me some small books of his sheikh. When I read the books that he gave me, I realized why he made me read the books of Al-Albani. Because the sheikh in those books was refuting Al-Albani, and he didn't want me to not actually do the work and just rely on what the sheikh was saying by blind following. But when I had read already the books of Al-Albani, when I saw his arguments, I knew where everything was at. That was genius. I knew where every single argument was, where Al-Albani contradicted himself, which book he said this, which book he said that, what the other scholars said. It was a research project that he did with me without me knowing what was happening. And I appreciate that to this day, right? I say, wow. He taught me how to research. And after he finished, I was convinced Al-Albani was 1,000% wrong. I was convinced, right? And I could show it. And that was a good lesson. So when we're talking about it, we're going to say, okay, he was right in this, and he was mistaken in this, and this is why. Boom, 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 boom. In fact, this one, he actually was really on point, and this is why. Boom, 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 boom. I'm not saying every single one of us got to do that. Among us, someone who actually loves us has to have that ability. We need to have and develop among us some of us who can do that. So when we're talking, it's not ego. Just open the books. They're right there. We got to actually know the books. We got to actually have the books. We got to have the ability to read the books. Yeah, this is an important part of study. Who goes to university and do no research? Who does that? Us. No, that doesn't work. You got to research. Got to be fair. And don't let nobody tell us collectively we're not intelligent enough to do that. So they just got to tell us everything. And when they do that, that's how they do this stuff they do to us. Because collectively, we have a collective disdain for work, research, investigation, and academic integrity. Collectively, we don't like that. And Mr. Charlie taught us that. We got to fix that. All right, that was my response to that. Are we done?
Yeah. I didn't have
We
anything.
we burnt both ends of the camp. And listen, tomorrow, let me find out something. Can y'all see if there's anything else while y'all close out? I want to find out something.
Ain't nothing else. Is we done or is we finished?
I'm checking something real quick. Hold on one second. I'm doing research, brother. We may tomorrow. I had got an agreement with Sheikh Noor tomorrow morning to go over this scholarly academic approach for the Hanbali school. And we want to have a discussion about that. And his thing was, let's have a real discussion. And I said, Ahlan wa sahlan, let's do it. It'd be great. And so if you can tune in, I hope. If not, I'll do it in the Shafi'i school. If he doesn't come, inshallah, I'll do it in the Shafi'i school because I'm Shafi'i. And I'll add some Hanbali.
You ain't Maliki yet?
Maliki? I can't.
Yeah.
Shafi
You ain't there yet?
Shafi Said?
Maybe about 6 more months. 6
Ain't
more months
no
to a year.
party
You
like a
know.
Shafi party because a Shafi party don't stop. Right. When you study the Shafi school, even if you love the other schools, you got to admit, you know what I mean? It's like these dudes were like that, right? They like that. Right. But we love the Malikis and we love the Hanbalis and we love the Hanafis, but you know, it is what it is.
That's SOE. Shafi's over everything.
Right. You know what I mean?
You know the Maliki school is calling.
Right. So inshallah, we'll August the 18th, Sunday, we will return to Newark, New Jersey, to the Temple of Hip Hop. So we'll have the flyer up tomorrow, inshallah. So August the 18th, Sunday, August the 18th, we'll be in Newark, New Jersey, continuing our lessons there at the Temple of Hip Hop. So inshallah, we'll see some of you then. So inshallah, we'll see you tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock. Hopefully, Sheikh Noor will join us and we'll do the Hanbali thing with insaf, with fairness. And after you're going to be so fair, some tech fears going to be flying all over the place. What did you just say? Kufr. All right, but who's closing out? I went to the store first.
I closed last week.
Imam Naeem, Le Corner Store.
The French Quarter.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت واستغفرك وأتوب إليك والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر.
Inshallah, we'll see you tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock. Inshallah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.